Hi, this is Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 61 of 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast. This week, I'm going to concentrate on a piece of hardware I own that has not gotten a lot of love from me or from anybody else, and that's my A570 CD-ROM drive for my Amiga 500. I picked up my A570 CD-ROM drive in 1993 when I was going to the University of Arizona down here in Tucson. Now, I'd already owned an Amiga 3000 for about 2 years, and that got all my attention. And to be honest, my Amiga 500 had been sitting in my closet the entire time for years. I hadn't really touched it in years. But I saw this A570 on sale locally for $100, and it included the 1 megabyte Agnes upgrade completely installed, so I could not pass that deal up. Now, I'd been spoiled for years with my Amiga 3000. With its 2 megabytes of chip RAM, I had 4 megabytes of fast RAM in there, a nice fast 52, thank you phone, 52 megabyte hard drive. I'd just been spoiled with it, so that A500 with its 512K of chip, 512K of fast, and a second floppy drive had just been stowed away in the closet. But out of the closet it came, and I took it into my local computer shop, ComputerWise, that was here in Tucson at the time, had them do the 1 megabyte upgrade. I remember picking up Defender of the Crown for it, and Advanced Military Systems, and I think a Fred Fish public domain disk for it, and I got to work playing with it. And I realized real quick I had a lot more fun on my Amiga 3000, even with a CD-ROM on my Amiga 500. And really, back to the closet it went after a few weeks. Now, I do have some memories of hooking up my Amiga 3000 to my Amiga 500 and A570 with a serial cable and accessing the CD-ROM on the 3000 that way, but you know, it's a little bit foggy. Could be the fact that it was 25 years ago, could be the fact I was in college at the time, who knows. So it ended up back in storage. It followed me around the country as I moved from Tucson back to Illinois, and then Illinois back to Tucson. Then this A570 spent the next 20 years in a hot storage unit in Tucson, Arizona. That is until 2018 when I started the 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast, and I brought all of my Amiga equipment out of storage, including my A570. I hooked up my A570 to my Amiga 500 I had at the time, and nothing. Nada zip. Okay? The A500 would recognize the device was there, so I knew it was talking to it electrically, but it wouldn't even accept a disk into the mechanism. You'd go to push the disk in, and the little caddy, which of course the Amiga 5 or the A570 puts all of its disks in these little caddies here. Put it in there, nothing, wouldn't even go in. Took it apart, lubricated everything, cleaned everything, noticed a few little parts, little plastic parts had popped out of place, got them repositioned, and voila, the A570 started working pretty darn good again. And then it went back on the shelf for another 9 or 10 months because all of my other Amigas got all of the attention, and my Amiga 500 was converted into my beautiful Checkmate case done by Stephen Jones. Now, I do have a second Amiga 500 here with a version 5 motherboard. I picked that up used last year. Works just fine with my A570. Well, now it's the A570's time to shine on this episode. So it's all spinning up at its massive 500 RPM, up to 500 RPM, and its single speed disk speed, and it's ready to show off what it can do. So, what exactly can we do with this lovely and charming piece of tech here? Let's take a look. Now, one of the A570's strongest claims to fame is that it makes the Amiga 500 fully CDTV compatible. And of course, many of you know that the CDTV was a product that Commodore came out with in 1991 that was designed to fit in your cabinet under your TV and look just like a VCR. It was an Amiga 500 internally with a built-in CD-ROM drive and some special software that came with it. Now once you hook up your A570 to your Amiga 500, the A570 really takes control of things. It uses the same kind of power supply as an Amiga 500 does, exactly the same, but the Amiga 500 will not power on until the A570's power is turned on. If there's a floppy in the drive, a bootable floppy, it will prioritize that and boot to the floppy first. But if there's a bootable CDTV disk in the drive, then it will boot directly into CDTV mode. Now let's see what we can do in CDTV mode. Like I mentioned before, all the CDs go into these little caddies. This isn't one of the ones you put it in a tray and it sucks it in. It goes into a caddy and kind of acts like a big floppy disk after that. Close it up, snap shut, and this is ready to be inserted right into the into the A570 drive. Now the caddies were a pretty common way of doing things back then. Now remember, this was 1991 and we did not have CD-ROMs in our computers at that time. They absolutely were available. And I looked up some prices, I'll put them right here, from a Compute magazine from 1991. Let's see, the Shinon drive was $459 for the bare drive. The Toshiba drive was $649 for the bare drive. These things were not cheap. They were not commodities for several years after this. So now, maybe it makes a little more sense why the CDTV was $899 back in the day, when it cost $500 alone just for a bare CD-ROM drive with no computer. They were supplying an Amiga 500 with a CD-ROM drive, plus all the extra stuff and cool things that go with it for $899. The pricing really was not that bad. Let's take a look first at how it handles an audio CD. This is a CD from my friend Joe Jenks. I've mentioned him before. He's a fantastic folk artist, very, very popular in the folk artist community in the United States, and he also travels around the world touring. Check him out at joejenks.com. Awesome guy. And I really hope I don't get a copyright hit for this. If so, Joe, talk to YouTube. Tell them to take the hit off there, please. So we're going to take the CD, put her right in the tray. The first thing you'll notice when we plug in our standard CD into here, an audio CD, is our interface comes up showing the number of tracks on the CD. You can control the little flashing cursor you see either with the cursor keys or with the mouse or even with a joystick if you have a joystick installed. Works just fine. We're going to go down here and play a song. Just hit the enter key. And you can hear it starting to play one of Joe's songs here. Now, over here, this little symbol, it will play the first 10 seconds of every song on the CD, so you can get a sample of what you're going to listen to.
There was a time when all I ever needed was your smile to drive away my...
Now, over here, you can see features like randomizing the songs. It'll play them in random order. Here you've got repeat. This symbol here in the lower right is for CD plus G, which are a rather uncommon form of CD that actually has like a graphic slideshow that will play in the background while the CD is playing. Now, I had looked all over for one of these last year at one of my local used CD stores, and I could not find any CD plus G discs, so I don't have any to demo, but you can find a few examples of it online. Let's move on to some CD-specific discs now. These are all auto-booting discs, like the classic Defender of the Crown here. Put in the caddy and power it up, and the system auto-boots right into the game. While the CD is faster than a floppy, it's still single speed and a bit slow. A lot of the CDTV games were just updates of existing Amiga games with added voice work and music. None were real blockbusters that took full advantage of the CDTV, but remember, this was early in the life of the CD-ROM, and nobody knew quite what to do with all that space. Many kids' stories were created with mediocre animations and voice acting just because there was space to dump it in. Other popular CDTV titles like this Grolier's Encyclopedia were created. With 650 megabytes of space, one would assume they would fill it with awesome text, animations, and photos. But they did not. There is some digitized speech and a few pictures and photos, but this was a real missed opportunity. Later encyclopedias on CD were far superior, but again, this was early in the game. Let's look up a bit of digitized speech and see what it can do. Let's look up John F. Kennedy.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Not bad, but not mind-blowing. In 1991, it was quite a feat, though. Here's one with some ham images of military equipment called Advanced Military Systems. This one started to push the envelope with digitized speech, nice quality images, and info on planes and tanks. But so many of these were just a curiosity that after an hour or so of goofing around on it, it probably got pretty stale back in the day. Now, Commodore also came out with an animation format called CDXL that did a pretty good job of animating video and audio in a small window. Not bad for a 7 MHz system with a meg of memory, really.
So the A570, we've already seen, can play some CDTV titles. We've already seen it handles audio CDs just fine. What else can we do with this little guy, say, in Workbench? So the A570 can play any of the CDTV titles just fine, and it can play music CDs. Now there were maybe 100 or so CDTV titles that came out, about 40 of which were unique CDTV titles. The rest of them were just ports of Amiga games with maybe some speech overlaid on them or a few other little enhancements like music that the CDTV could handle. I would say in looking at the CDTV titles, I find about 5 or 6 of them that actually really even catch my eye and seem to be interesting to me. There's a lot of them out there that are just like kids' storybooks, you know, A Bun for Barney, that kind of thing. And I don't even think kids would be all that interested in that, but that's just me. But let's take a peek at some of the other cool things that she can do once we boot into Workbench. Now I'm using Workbench 1.3 with 1.3 ROMs on this Amiga 500. Not only because that's what the A570 was designed for, and it does link up with the ROM and gives it special capabilities, but this is a revision 5 board in here. So in order to use one of the 512 kilobyte ROMs, I would have to physically mod the ROM chip and jumper some pins on there to get it to be recognized, and I just couldn't be bothered. It just wasn't important enough. Now, I did try this with the ROMulator that I reviewed a couple of months ago. I didn't suspect it would work properly, and it didn't. Put the ROMulator in there, the Amiga 500 boots fine, you can choose whatever ROM you want to, but then it completely ignores the A570. It did not see it when I put a CDTV disc in. It did not see it when I would boot into Workbench 1.3. It just didn't even exist to it. So I'll have to get in touch with Kipper2K and see if there's anything that can be done about that. Once you put in a disk into the A570 and you have Workbench running, the icon for the disk will show up right up on the desktop. And you're able to access it just like a regular Amiga device, just like it was a big giant floppy basically. This was fantastic for archives of public domain software like the incredible Fred Fish collection or any of the other PD collections. There were even AmiNet discs that came out back in the day where it would catalog most of the AmiNet files back in the 90s, put them right on CD, and they would distribute that on CD. You could just take the stuff and bring it right over to your Amiga that way. Now, to be honest, on an Amiga 500 with just 1 megabyte of chip RAM, and 2 floppy drives, there are limits to what you can do. Like you get the latest image effects disc on CD. You're not going to be able to use it right off the CD. You're not going to be able to use it on this. You really need something like a hard drive to be able to do that. Now, if we could get this working with some kind of hard drive, that would make an excellent system right there. Now, I've got a copy of this Euroscene 1 CD from back in the 90s. This is a bunch of European demos that were created to run on a machine like this. And there's some pretty cool ones in there. There's some that aren't so cool, but there's some pretty cool ones. Let's take a look at a few just for laughs. So you can see here that it mounts the CD just as another device. All of this right here, you can go in here and take a look at all of the files that are on this disk. Most of these are in LHA format, so you'll have to decompress them before you can use it. So in my case, what I did is I decompressed the files to my second floppy drive. Now, if you don't have LHA on your own specific floppy, let's say you're like me and you ran out of room for it, here's something cool that you can do. Let's go ahead and open a command prompt, and we're going to go to CD0. We're now on the Euroscene CD. We're going to look in the tools directory on here, and you're going to see, let's see, yep, we've got LHA right here. This is our decompression program. Okay, look what we can do. We can type this command, path CD0 : tools add. What that's going to do is, while we're using Workbench right now, until the next time we reboot, every time we go to use a command, any kind of command on the Amiga, it's not only going to look in the Amiga's default paths, which are the sys directory, the C directory, it's also going to look in the CD0 tools directory, and it's going to find this LHA file, and we're going to be able to decompress our files without any problems at all. We're going to go back a level here. We're going to go into the demo directory. Now we're just going to do a quick little directory listing here, and you're going to see what all's on this disk. Demos. We're going to do a directory. Each of these folders that it's pulling up has between 1 and 3 demos on it. Here we're on D, E, F. So you can see there are many, many, many demos in here. Yikes. Okay, so let's go into this Zeus folder, since it's the last one that pops up. We're going to do a directory here. We see that there's a systemx.lha. Let's take a look and make sure we have room to decompress that. If not, I'll make a little room. Okay, let's look at this systemx. We're going to type lha x system_x.lha. We're going to decompress it to the df1 drive. Hit enter, and it should do our decompression for us. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to now look on the CD in that tools directory for LHA. It finds it and does the decompression. Makes it pretty sweet. Now, of course, this is decompressing everything from a single speed CD-ROM to a floppy disk, so it takes a few seconds. If we had a hard drive in this Amiga 500, it'd be a lot faster. Let's go to our df1 folder and take a look. And looky there, there's our systemx. Now let's run this and see if it is actually appropriate to put in my video, because some of them were not. Give it a second. It's loading it up loading up the demo. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? Love the demo scene. They did some fantastic things back then, and they do some fantastic things even now. I wouldn't doubt if some of these groups are still doing demos. Let's look at one more that I decompressed already from this disk. Oh yeah, nice traditional thing, fancy color logos, great music, and funky spinning objects on the screen. Pretty typical demo, but really kind of cool. Now you can certainly burn your own discs and use them with the A570. You're going to have to use CDR discs. Don't use CDRWs because the technology here is just too old and it doesn't really read the CDRW discs. Find yourself some CDR discs, and when you burn them on a slower speed. Your DVD burner in your PC or your Mac can burn at 52 speed or 100 speed or whatever, but that's not going to work real well. Burn it at like single speed, double speed, or quad speed. Just slow down the burning process and you're going to get more reliable results here. So where can you get the software from? Well, there are some great resources online, including archive.org, that has a lot of the CD-ROM or CDTV software on it. Not only some old, long discontinued commercial releases, but also some great public domain archives and some great compilations that people have put together. I'll put a couple of links in the description of some of the safe ones to use. There's also a fair amount of CDTV software that I found on eBay, but people generally want between $30 and $50 per disc for it. If you're a collector, fantastic, order some of those up. If not, you can just play around with some of the old stuff. Now there's a couple features of the A570 that are worth mentioning. The little guy is expandable. Now, on the back, it has inputs and outputs, and I'll show some pictures here, for plugging your Amiga audio directly through the back of the device and then pumping it out so it can combine both CD, music, and digitized speech along with your regular Paula audio, which is kind of cool. But you'll notice there's also a faceplate on the back. This little guy could be expanded. One of them, the expansions that they talked about, was a 2 megabyte fast RAM expansion that plugs into a little port right inside the CD unit itself. There weren't very many of them made, not many available, but the good news is some enterprising people have reverse engineered the card and now sell these new on eBay. I just picked one up and ordered it for like $30 from a guy in the UK. Should be here in a couple of weeks. But adding 2 megabytes to my Amiga 500 will open up an entire new world here. Like, instead of decompressing those demos that I want to look at to a floppy drive over and over, decompress them to RAM. You got plenty of RAM then, because all of these demos work on a 1 meg Amiga for the most part. Decompress them to RAM, play them back right there. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. The second was a SCSI interface that could be hooked up. The CD drive interface on here is neither IDE nor SCSI. It's a proprietary Matsushita, I think, interface. But you could get a SCSI interface for your A570, which is kind of cool, actually. And then you could add an external SCSI drive to this. I am not 100% sure if it's going to be an auto boot SCSI drive, but I'm going to get one of these ordered. I found a couple of them on eBay. I'm going to get one ordered, and I'm going to see if it makes it an auto boot SCSI drive. If not, I'll just have to create a special bootable floppy disks that passes the boot capabilities over to the drive. But once this thing has an additional 2 megabytes of RAM and a nice little SCSI hard drive on there, maybe a 1 or a 2 gig SCSI drive, this is going to be a perfectly usable system. It's going to take it to the same power level as something like adding an A2091 card into an Amiga 2000, plus you got a CD-ROM on there to boot. Not too shabby. They released this just after they discontinued the Amiga 500, which seems crazy in retrospect. You know, you got this new CD-ROM drive for your computer that you just discontinued. I can sort of see their point, because there were millions of Amiga 500s out there, and they figured, well, people are going to want to add a CD-ROM to those. Now, what they should have done is, at the same time that they released this, they should have released a PCMCIA interface for the Amiga 600 and the upcoming Amiga 1200 that hooked right up to a SCSI or another type of CD-ROM drive that the Amiga 600 or the Amiga 1200 could do. Put that on the shelf right next to these. You know, hey, you got an Amiga 500? We got you covered. Got an Amiga 600 or the new 1200? We got you covered. CD-ROMs for everybody. That would have really made a difference in how people saw Commodore and their adoption of the CD-ROM protocol. Too late now, though. So what's my final opinion? Should you rush out and buy one of these for your Amiga 500? If you want to do it to complete your collection, that's perfectly acceptable. If you want to do it to add fantastic CD-ROM capabilities onto your Amiga 500, maybe look at another route. Look at something like the classic 520 accelerator I reviewed a few months ago. It has a standard 40-pin header on it for IDE. Get yourself a $30, $20 IDE CD-ROM. Rig up a little bit of cabling, rig up an external case and power supply. You've got yourself a more flexible system that will do pretty much the same thing. Now, I would like to thank my wonderful patrons for supporting me on Patreon. You can too. Just follow the link down here to my website dedicated to my Patreon site, and you can become a member of this illustrious group. Thanks for spending a bit of time with me today. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. Share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it. Follow me on Twitter at 10mark1. But until next time, this is Doug from 10 Minute Amiga Retrocast, signing out.